welcome very much in the audience to the program. We have as a guest now a dear friend of mine and the world, particularly New York City, and that's being Anthony or Tony Gronowicz. He's a Ph.D. professor of history at CUNY, and he writes on a history of New York City, particularly acutely, but on many other subjects. And he recently just ran in the recent election as the Green Party candidate for the office of the mayor of New York City. And he's a citizen extraordinaire, a very brilliant fellow, if I would venture to say. And Tony, welcome so much to Conversations again.
Thank you again, Harold.
We've known each other a long time, and it's always a delight to talk with you.
Since the previous millennium.
Yes, I think so, and beyond, back to the design. Anyway, so let's go over real quick. You're a history professor.
That's
you
right.
see things from a historical perspective.
Yes, I do.
And so maybe you could share just a little bit of that, and then we'll get into the mayorship and all that, and where do we go from here?
Well, I was born and raised in New York City.
Right, you are.
And I went to Columbia, and then to the University of Pennsylvania, where I did my Ph.D. in Philadelphia on New York City Democratic Party history.
You wrote a lot
in
about
the 19th century.
Civil War period.
Well, I ended with the Civil War.
Yeah,
I ended with a bang, not with a whimper.
Yes.
With the draft riots, which were the most horrific and the most racist, because the riots led to the lowest population of African Americans proportional to the total population in the history of the city. Because the people blame the victims, as they do today. Although more and more people are victimized, and they can't blame their next door neighbor or even the guy down the block. They have to blame the people in the positions of power, of political power and finance.
As always, they have, I guess. Right?
Well, they've been. The polarization of wealth in this city is greater than it's been since slave days.
And in this country.
And in the country, yes, for a very long period, but especially in the city because it's a globalized economy.
Right.
And every rich person on the planet wants a second home in New York City. And therefore, the housing costs are very high for the average New Yorker. And if their children move back, they can't find an affordable housing, or should we say income-based housing, because affordable housing for one person is not affordable housing for another.
That's true enough,
So you need to be more precise when you use that term.
Yeah.
So anyway, I came in 5th, as I did in 2005.
Oh, in the election now you're talking.
I'm sorry, I came in 4th.
Yeah.
And I didn't miss a day of work.
Yeah, okay, right.
But it was much more exciting than it was in 2005.
When you had run again,
I felt like Kirk Douglas in that wonderful epic in Technicolor that he played Ulysses for De Laurentiis in 1955, and I was battling the political devils and embracing the insurgencies in the city. And there were a lot of them.
Yeah, right.
Especially after the Occupy movement, there were a lot of decentralized oppositional spots in the city where people are organizing on a community basis and trying to protect themselves against the crooked politicians. So
that Occupy was a sterling moment, wasn't it?
Right. If you remember,
it still exists.
Yes, it still exists in a decentralized fashion.
Right.
I don't know if you remember the headlines in the Post and the News back in April when they arrested the Malcolm Smith and Republican from Queens and a bunch of other guys. And on both the headline on the Post and the News was, "It's all about the effing money," describing what the political situation is here. And of course, de Blasio, who won, raised more money than all the other candidates put together. And we are not in a position to do that as a third party because we take the position that we are not going to take financing from real estate or Wall Street.
The Green Party.
And of course, as we know, Wall Street is at a record as I speak on this 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination.
This very day,
And homelessness is at a record.
Is that true? Is that a true fact?
Yes, it is a true fact. In fact, the number of homeless children has risen 500% since 2008. There are now 55,000 students in public schools who are homeless.
Good Lord.
So this is what, they don't talk about this because It's nothing they want to brag about. They want to brag about and puff themselves up about all they're doing, but they really have done very little. And of course, as you know, de Blasio got 73% of the vote and Lota got 25%. And that was a huge disparity. But more importantly, only 26% or 24% of the population who are eligible to vote, that means people who are registered to vote, voted, which is the lowest level, lowest percentage since World War I, since before women got the right to vote in 1917, during World War I.
I don't follow things as carefully as you obviously do in the local elections, but leading up to a year or so, it was sort of, the word was, Christine Quinn's a shoo-in to be the new mayor, and it came up as a surprise to the politicals that de Blasio was able to win and she was not. They thought that she would be a shoo-in to be the new mayor.
Well, she was saddled with her role in giving Bloomberg a third term.
Right, right.
She arm twisted and said, you know, you're not going to get your money.
And for those who are cynical and think, well, the power structure's in place, you can't fight City Hall is a term you hear all the time. That was reigning in people's mind. Well, I guess they'll just continue with what they're doing, and you can't fight
Well, you
City
can't
Hall.
do that because
the little people can't do anything
but
ever.
we had Sandy, and Sandy.
That's true.
If you remember, Bloomberg wanted to run the marathon. Right after Sandy, was in a week of Sandy's horrible.
Yeah, really hit the east side of New York.
Well, the Lower East Side and the shore areas.
Right.
Far Rockaway, Coney Island, Brighton Beach, down the shore, Staten Island. Especially Staten Island.
You think?
And you know, he wanted to run the marathon, and totally insensitive to the needs of the city because he wanted to bring in $500 million revenue for his cronies in the tourist industry and the hotels. And de Blasio came out for it too because he was clueless. But then he was tapped on the shoulder by one of his advisors who said, you know, that's not too smart an idea, Bill. And John Lew also took the same position. So both of them were in the same camp as Bloomberg, briefly, albeit, because then they realized how great the devastation was. But any of us who are on the ground, who have students in the city university, was aware that this was a disaster of unparalleled proportions to hit the city.
Don't want to go in great depth or anything, but do you think we can, maybe down the line a little bit, the idea, a larger issue in a certain sense is Sandy, and not to mention the thing that just hit the Philippines, and the whole issue of global warming is one. You're an ecologically imbibed. Green bespeaks ecology, so you're tuned into those issues, and that's being overlooked by the established authorities, including those that have been running New York City.
Well, the established authorities get their money through fossil fuels.
Right.
That's where the money comes from.
And the wars are fought over that in large measure, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Both World War I and World War II.
That's a critique of the system writ large.
Absolutely.
That the Greens and others maybe
and I'm involved with CUNY Divest from fossil fuels, which is chapters have sprouted in all the campuses.
Have they across the country, you mean?
Well, I'm talking about City University.
City University, but is it going on?
There's a program, CUNY Divest. Yes, and other campuses as well.
I would think so,
to
among the
divest
youth.
from fossil fuels because obviously we have less oxygen in the air thanks to the burning of fossil fuels than at any time since the dinosaurs. During dinosaur time, 65 million years ago, 35% of the air was oxygen. Now it's down to 21%. We're poisoning ourselves.
Is that the fact of the matter?
That's
is it?
the fact.
Okay.
And you can get that from the bores that are set boring down.
Ice cores too.
Ice cores, exactly.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, well, that's a side issue in a certain sense, but it's still one that is part of the context
we have to breathe. We have to breathe.
That is an important kind of issue, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, air is important. Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah, but have you been a Green all along? Or
no,
being Green, am I right in associating the Green with a deep-seated sense, maybe even deep ecological concern?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was the whole point.
Yeah, okay.
1996, I became a Green when I heard that Ralph Nader was running for president.
Yeah.
I decided to run on the Upper East Side for state assembly.
I see.
So I've been a Green now for almost 20 years.
And to be a Green, you could be a political opponent, but not necessarily be so grounded in your critique of what is in ecological concern. You could be concerned about just distribution of income among
Well,
the
there can't be
classes
any
and so-
environmental, can't be any social justice unless there's environmental justice.
Okay, that's
And the case in point is the Bronx. The poorest urban county in the nation has the most toxic waste dumps in the city of the 5 boroughs.
Right, okay, yeah, right. Yeah.
And one of the first things I became involved in the late 90s was the South Bronx incinerator.
Okay.
And we
Spell
marched
it out,
against
I'm
it.
not sure.
There was an incinerator in
Yeah.
the South Bronx, and we
Uh-huh.
wanted to close down because
South Bronx.
yes,
Yeah.
because it was poisoning the residents, specifically the children. There's a reason why asthma rates are so high among school children, because not only was that going on, but also the Cross Bronx Expressway is the largest generator of pollutants in the South Bronx.
Is that
It's an
right?
open air pit of toxic, noxious asthma.
Exhaust film.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know,
Robert Moses.
right, Robert Moses. His
Yeah.
idea of helping the oil companies by promoting auto transport.
Right.
And
yeah.
after, especially after the,
Carroll writes that.
right,
well. Robert Carroll.
yes, he
He
did.
writes well on and what do you think of Moses, or even that period
Well,
when they were building?
there wasn't a highway he didn't like,
Yeah.
and he wanted to have everything accessible by automobile.
Yeah.
And in the 1950s, after the United States overthrew the democratic government of Iran
Uh-huh.
and installed the
53.
Shah in 1953,
Uh-huh.
it's no accident that in the mid-50s, right afterwards, Eisenhower comes up with the Interstate Highway Plan, which is when they built all the 91s and 84s and 95s.
Took his inspiration from the Autobahns
And actually
in Nazi
the
Germany.
right, well the interstate highways that were built cost more than the Marshall Plan.
I think the original.
Than the Marshall Plan.
I think I can remember back then. I was alive, unfortunately, at that long time ago, day and everything. But I think I got the figure something like $20 billion was involved, and that was thought of as overwhelmingly huge. The interstate commitment to the interstate system, and the interstate system does serve or has served for some decades.
Yes,
know?
but not at the expense of dismantling the rail network, because most
yeah,
countries are more advanced when it comes to high-speed rail travel.
right, particularly with
The railroads were looted by various dynasties like the Harrimans, and then dumped on the population in the form of Amtrak, which then was in danger of going bankrupt. So they loot these companies and then go bankrupt and drop the charges for the bankruptcy on the public. And the rail travel was greatly diminished. I mean, you look at what's going on. We didn't have ready oil supplies, and we were self-sufficient in the 1920s and 30s. We built the transit system. I mean, the A line, the C line.
Yeah, the red line in Los Angeles.
Well,
yeah.
I'm talking about here. I'm
you
just
keep
looking
in
at New York
yeah,
City.
okay, fair enough. Yeah.
And that was built in half a dozen, 7 or 8 years. Now it's taken them 60 years to try and build the 2nd Avenue subway. Since 1960, this has been going on, and here we are in 2013.
Yeah.
All right, 53 years.
Yeah, it's tearing
To
up
be
the
fair.
east side now, but
It's
got another.
it's so slow. It's sad.
Well, it is kind of hard.
And in the 20s and even earlier, we had elevated lines all over. We had a 7th Avenue line, 8th Avenue, 9th, 10th. We had
we used to have things called
3rd Avenue line, 1st Avenue,
And we
2nd,
used to have
elevated trains. That
Yeah,
is.
right. And we used to have things called interurban too. There would be connections between urban centers that would be electric and train-like.
Well,
we
had
interurban it was called.
we had running down the east side and the west side these buses that had these electrical lines attached to
Trolleys.
the buses on electric trolleys. Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And you had trolleys that connected towns upstate and various cities
Yeah.
across the country.
I was in Michigan. They had interurban. It was called. It was.
Well, they dismantled all of
Yeah.
this in the name of oil and gas.
Was that because?
And of course, gasoline is a carcinogen, so that increases the cancer rate.
Okay. Yeah. And also, it was
Aside from the burning materials, the fossil fuels.
I was from Detroit, and my family. I think I've related in another program. My family was there, and down on 16th Street, that house And Henry Ford, when he was about 8 or 9 years old, used to tinker in their garage before he built the Rouge plant and all this. And the automobile industry was coming. It was bringing an independence that was very valuable and very much wanted by a great number of people. So it was the age of the automobile and independent, rather than dependence upon mass transit and so forth.
Well, it was a substitute. It was a substitute for land ownership. Every man would own his own homestead. He'd be master of his own castle.
Mm-hmm.
And when the frontier closed in the 1890s, it just so happened that it was just about the time that the automobile is starting to be used.
1890s?
Yes, 1893, the frontier is formally closed as a famous speech that Frederick Jackson Turner gave to the American Historical Association, I believe in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
The significance of the frontier in American history.
Well, what we're going into is a historical
So what
development.
happens is that the automobile is this notion of having your own control over your mobility.
Well,
but it's horizontal mobility, not vertical mobility.
Well, also, it's not individualized. It's mass.
It's mass, but everybody can have their own car
after 1890,
and have their own family in their own car, and that reinforces this family
But after the
identity.
1890s and everything, or even from that, but the thing that built that was the railways. You had the railways going, but that was not individual owned. You still had a horse you had to get on, or you had to walk Shank's mare or something. But an individual was freed to have an automobile where they could get in and drive, so they needed highways.
But before that could happen,
it's the advance of
before
technology.
that could happen, there had to be a First World War, and no country sacrificed so little and gained so much from the First World War as the United States, so that in the 1920s, the war industries were converted to peacetime industries. That's when you get the phonograph, and that's when you get the automobile, and that's when Los Angeles population goes up hundreds and hundreds of percent between 1920 and 1930.
They could see good climate, for one thing. Get out of those nasty winters we had to put up with here.
Exactly. But the point is that the economy was somewhat better, obviously. And then you had the Depression. And then even greater prosperity was engendered through the Second World War. Again, no country sacrificed so little and gained so much through the war.
It was inevitable.
And then after that, the people wanted to get out of the cities because the black population was moving up from the South due to racism.
Great migration,
as the technological advances occurred in the South, especially in the cotton industry. And they were moving out and moving to the cities. And so the white population was moving out to the suburbs. And then suburban living became idealized, except in people who took the long-term, novelists such as Richard Yates' Revolutionary Road, which was made into a movie. It's a wonderful, bleak,
go ahead,
bleak novel about suburban life. And he was considered a writer's writer, and when he died, Richard Yates.
Richard Yates, Y-E-A-T-E-S. Yes, okay, I don't know. It's called what again?
Revolutionary Road.
Revolutionary Road.
It was made into a film.
Hollywood
well, recently. It became,
more recent,
well, let's say recently for historian, I think in the last 10 years. I think Leonardo DiCaprio was in the film.
I see,
And not obviously.
And what its theme was is what?
Well, it was pretty banal, pretty horrifying in an Edgar Allan Poe sense. I mean, Poe took that same perspective toward industrialization.
Okay, that's an idea.
In the 1840s.
Right, okay. That's
and
a
the
large
1830s.
Theme,
when we went from an agricultural and mercantile environment to an industrial environment. And Poe was chronicling the horrors of the downside of industrialization, as was Poe. Dickens talked about.
Dickens was doing in England,
Dickens was doing it in England, but Hawthorne was doing it here with his short stories like The Celestial Railroad, which was a railroad that really ended up going to hell.
Oh, I see. Right.
But it's a marvelous short story.
So
People don't read, so they're not aware of how critical American novelists have been of this dependence on an anti-nature environment
And
that
all of
industrialism
the anti, not to mention
engenders.
Thoreau, not to mention Thoreau
Well, of
and
course,
Walden and
Thoreau.
all that. Yeah.
Absolutely. But he said a
And
pox on
Emerson, yeah.
But Thoreau said a pox on both your houses, both the farmer and the industrialist.
Yeah.
And he went out into the wilderness.
Right. So that's an anti-industri a take like that.
But he also was predicting the Civil War. The war that's in Walden between the black ants and the red ants.
Yeah.
Between the blue and the gray.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I had never made that connection.
But he didn't know that. I mean, he died during the Civil War. He died in 1862.
So that's a large theme that we can set against the whole human experience is the industrialization. Or Gordon Childs wrote a great book I liked. It was called Man Makes the World, or Man Makes the World, or something. And that we have a unique capability, unlike most of the creatures embedded in nature, to extend our consciousness through tools and technology and make the world other than, in an Eden-like sense, you are embedded in nature. And there are people who take exception to that idea. Some people think it's called progress, Auguste Comte or something. You got progress going. And that's a large theme that you can write human history, a large theme that you can use.
It's also specifically American, because the Pilgrims, the Puritans regarded nature as a wilderness. They were Old Testament folk.
They
regarded nations as a wilderness. Well, I wouldn't look at it that way, but you want to look at it that way, that's fine.
Did you ever work on a farm?
I'm not talking about a farm. Well, I'm talking about wilderness, not talking about farms.
Yeah.
And you have to take this, tame the wilderness, and the animals are beasts, and the Indians are savages, and we are the pure people, the enlightened, the chosen, and we will. So this is a whole Old Testament view that was imposed upon the United States before it even became the United States. And of course, the Pilgrims founded the richest university in the nation, Harvard, where a lot of this stuff was reinforced by the kind of top-down teaching and scholarship that they engage in 1636, Harvard University.
Yeah.
And then because people felt that the Harvard people were becoming too secular, they founded Yale in 1704.
Is that right? I didn't realize that. Yeah.
And then other colleges in the Ivy League. Of course, many of those colleges were dependent on the drug trade.
Yeah, opium wars.
Opium. All the mansions, not all the mansions, but many of the mansions in Newport are the consequence of the opium trade.
Then a lot of those did in opium, they did rum running, all kinds of illegalities.
Let's put it this way, drugs. Washington was the biggest whiskey distiller in the in the late colonial, early republic period. And that's why we had a whiskey rebellion, because he was being taxed.
Shays Rebellion.
No, whiskey rebellion, 1794. Shays Rebellion was 1787.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Was 1786.
That same general time frame.
But the whiskey rebellion was about Washington paying 6 cents a gallon on his whiskey, and they were trying to make the small farmers pay 9 cents a gallon. So the small farmers in western Pennsylvania rose up, they burned down the tax collector's house, and Washington, with Hamilton leading the troops, went to western Pennsylvania. And it was the first time the military was used in American life to suppress a domestic insurrection.
I'll be damned, okay.
And of course,
what year again? What year?
1794.
94, okay.
3 years after the Bill of Rights was ratified, which led to the, was put into the Constitution as the first 10 amendments.
And this is part,
and then we have Jefferson and Madison, who were tobacco farmers. And of course, Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in the New World, was also stabilized through tobacco production, because nicotine is the most addictive drug. So what you have is a drug culture from the outset, only they separate alcohol and nicotine from the other drugs. Well, I would argue for social, cultural, and financial reasons. But because again, marijuana is less harmful than alcohol.
So one guy I did a program recently,
except to the lungs, if you smoke it.
Tip O'Neill once said all politics is local. I think all politics is economic in a very real sense. That's what is being fought over and so forth, economic issues. And the economic issues can be seen against a broader theme, which is this one of man's role in changing the face of the earth.
Well, but now we have a technology the
I
technology.
mean, it can all be seen in
right.
that template.
Well, the
And
technology
the
today.
ecology of the Green Party, the ecological sense, is a continuation of something. But
Well,
the
we have
whole
this- we have-
history of the world can be seen against that tableau.
In the beginning, the environment controlled humans. And then we
Yeah, we were
learned to
embedded.
harness the environment, and now we learn to change the environment in a way that is not conducive to future human progress. Because of globalization, jobs can be exported, and the state is being militarized because the European cultures, of which the United States is the last expression of that projection of Europe onto the world, that was successful, certainly up until the 1970s, is no longer viable because they cannot provide jobs, they cannot provide a decent future for most of the population. So they're preparing for class warfare, so they're militarizing everything from the police force down to the City University security forces. I was at City University this morning for a hearing being held by two students.
Yes, I got the email about that. That's a pain in the neck. They're attacking students for demonstrating.
Exactly. And what happened yesterday, the faculty senate at City College met, and the president of the college came, and she said, and I'm quoting, this event when they suppressed the Assata Shakur Morales Student Center, which had been around for decades, without announcing that they were going to do so, locking down the campus, locking down the library during midterms. She said she would not have arrested the students. She said also this was 180 degrees different from the way I would have handled it. She said, I didn't want students hurt or arrested. And not all, but most importantly, in terms of who wields the power now, not all decisions are within one's control. And then she started to cry. This was yesterday at City College.
Wow.
Because the security is calling the shots now, no longer the individual administrations at the city colleges.
What, did the faculty have any say?
No say whatsoever.
None,
A faculty member, guy who was the head of the union chapter on campus, had to stand online with the rest of us to get in the hearing. He wasn't even allowed into the main building where the hearing was being held.
That would be like the barons in the medieval thing, and do the students, the peasants, do they have any say?
No, they have no say anymore.
They have no say.
They have no say. They just have
like
to pay automatic tuition because the school is now majority African and Latino. And when tuition was free at City University from 1847 to 1975, it was mainly white. Also, we do not remember that in 1951 is when the first women were allowed in City College.
I didn't realize that. I thought
they did
women
not.
Were always there.
No, they were not always there.
They weren't?
1951.
That's up 138?
That's 137th. Yeah, complex up there.
And that was Harvard on the Hudson. That was a great school. There are all kinds.
Well,
of
if
good
you starve a
people
school, you're going to the standards are going to decline. The resources are going to decline. That's what the central administration, which is no longer on 80th Street, they moved to 42nd Street, a more secure building, and they're calling the shots.
Secure, like with cannons.
Secure, exactly. Well, in terms of the way they're treating the students, and they're militarizing the security forces. At one point in recent times, somebody discovered that they had ordered 190,000 bullets, some of them hollow point bullets. So what are they preparing for? Well, they're preparing for insurrection because they know they can no longer compete in the world, and they're taking it out on poor people.
Who no longer can compete? The university?
United States can no longer compete.
Okay, now you're getting
and they're taking City University, which is the most diversified university in the country, is being underserved by the military. That's the expression that this report prepared by the American Enterprise Unit said. So they're trying to put Naval Reserve Officer training and Army Reserve Officer training corps on every campus because the only job opportunities that are automatic these days are the military. And of course, if you want to conquer the world, because we have 96% of all the foreign bases in the world are U.S. And most of the world is African, Asian, and Latino, you don't want to have the notion, people judge by appearances, that it's just a continuation of the white man's burden. So you have a different complexion on the military force and on the officer corps. So this is all part of their plan.
Now, they being the...
They being the eye at the top of the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill.
Yeah, okay.
The financiers and the old families in New York, in the U.S., which call the shots.
Right.
Like Kerry is a member of an old family.
Yeah, Kennedy was.
Well, Kennedy, they were
newcomers after Joseph.
Well, they were newcomers. Yeah. They got in because of Al Capone, because of bootlegging, because of Johnny Walker, and they built up this fortune, so they were mavericks. Their fortune obviously came from alcohol. But I'm talking about the big industrialists like Rockefeller and Bush and the Koch brothers.
Well, that's modern, yeah.
Yeah, but they're oil. That's what I'm talking about. Who controls the energy? The planet controls the planet.
Yeah, I think
and that's their strategic objective. City University is looked upon as a source of military personnel. It's part of the militarization of the campus, where in this case, certainly, the City College president had no control over bringing on the security forces, which are heavily militarized. There was a hearing this morning, but instead of getting the facts out, because the 22nd of November, the 50th anniversary of Kennedy's assassination, they decided to settle this in front of us without any facts being presented, because they have no facts and no right on their side, just the mailed fist of the security forces.
Yeah. Well, I wonder.
Disregarding the faculty and disregarding the students in the decision making.
Right. Okay.
And even in the administration, as I just pointed out, unlike previous student uprisings, even the administration is not calling the shots. It was very clear from this remark. Not all decisions are within one's control, and especially
within whose control are those decisions?
Well, the decisions are being made by the top administrators at 42nd Street, CUNY Central,
and they has a very secure building. Do they have
secure?
Do they have a moat?
It's a they have a skyscraper, and they have security checks downstairs. You have to get into the elevator. They call upstairs, and it's on and on and on. It's extremely siege-like, as any skyscraper is. That you have to go through various checks on the ground floor.
Who was it that said those who was it Santayana? Those who do not understand history are doomed to repeat its errors, or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah, something like that.
Those who don't know history are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah, something like that. And and the thing is that you make an indictment of the current situation in New York City with Cooney and get a model in that. But if you look back through all of history, you're a historian, not just in New York or not the United States. It's always been like that.
Not always. Well, only since the melting of the ice. Only since the Ice Age.
Only since the Ice Age.
When there was
12,000.
Well, yes.
Well, you're making
when you get when you have class interests, some people have more land than others, and the others end up being serfs or slaves to those the landowners.
I would submit against that thing we were talking about at the beginning about man's role. They had a book we used to study. I did geography. Man's role in changing the face of the earth. You have this unique capability of making the world different than the one that you go and adjust to that is there. And throughout all of the evolutionary process, it's been pretty much red in tooth and claw. Yeah, and whoever's got the better teeth win, and the one who's swiftest.
If the Earth is a house, the Earth is a house, humans have the same impact on the house as termites.
No, I would submit that is not quite correct. I mean,
why is it not correct?
Because it's a matter of quantity, I guess, of the ability. It's a big difference. You know, birds make nests and butterflies make.
But they don't destroy the environment to the extent that human beings have.
They don't have the ability to. But the thing is that it's not a buttercups and butterfly world. It's a very vicious situation.
I understand that, but it does not destroy the environment anywhere near to the extent that the human beings have destroyed the environment, polluted the oceans with plastics 2 or 3 times the size of plastic residue in the oceans, strangling the dolphins and the whales and the fish.
Yeah. And that the natural order is somehow pristine and beautiful and good and everything. It's not. It's everybody's eating everything else.
No, but you're missing my point.
No, but the point I'm trying to make
Human beings are destroying the environment for everybody.
Well, okay, okay. Well,
it's not a question.
Okay, I'm trying to go along with your
people
thing.
should.
The
people
human
should,
beings
yeah.
are a plague upon the world.
And people should be vegetarians.
No, people are a plague upon the world.
And the latest study shows that they should eat nuts. If people who eat nuts live longer, but using any measure, this was again nothing new. We used to have nuts. This being the holiday season, it's Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you'd have a little crystal bowl filled with nuts and a nutcracker.
Or nutcracker,
and then you break the nuts and eat the nuts. And that's how it was before potato chips and other junk food that creates the films like Super Size Me come in and create all the diabetes and the obesity and the other diseases that people have.
My daddy was a lawyer, and he died and was buried on his 48th birthday. And he was born in 1899. That was the average age of a person in the United States.
And what did he die of?
Well, he had heart or something. There was no such thing as streptokinase. There was nothing that could come with a pulmotor. The point being is there's an opposite view in which you can see things. You can see a certain kind of progress. I wish they had had streptokinase to give him so that he didn't have to just die with a purple face and everything, because they did. That there is progress being made, and things there can be some improvement.
There is medical progress.
Rather, no. But you made a blanket indictment against humanity as a plague on the world.
No, you missed the point.
Or it seemed to be.
You're misquoting what I said.
I mean, I'm glad there are houses that you can live in.
I said human beings' impact on the environment is very destructive. I'm not talking about medical care.
It's also improving.
How does it improve the environment?
Well, isn't it better than one?
I'm talking about the environment. I'm talking about nature.
Well, okay.
I'm talking about the oceans. I'm talking about the air, the water, the earth.
Right.
Negative.
Well, okay. Go back to
air,
Malthus,
carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Water, pollution.
Right.
People dumping their medicines down the toilet, polluting the water supply.
Yeah.
Okay. And the earth.
Yeah.
Toxicity, toxic waste dumps, asbestos, burning things and burying it.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about.
So
it's a negative impact if it's not properly done.
How would you have the world organized? What would mankind's role? Would we be looking with tallow candles? Would we have no automobiles? Would we have no electricity?
I'm not saying
that. How far do you go with that?
I'm not saying that at all. We have to go to solar, wind, and wave and get rid of fossil and nuclear completely.
You think that would do it, right?
Absolutely.
You think that would
But it would take away the profit. That would
take
away the profit from the Sauds, the Rockefellers, the Bushes, and the Kochs.
Okay, that's good. Then you got a power
who represent inherited wealth in oil, and from their father, who was a founder of the John Birch Society and considered Eisenhower a communist. You can look this all up. That's the Koch brothers, and they're very influential in New York and in our politics. Nobody should have that kind of estate to do those kinds of things to the rest of us.
But history, for one thing, you could say history has always been that way. You had emperors in Rome, and you had
but
kings,
the technology was much more primitive. Harold, the technology was much more primitive and not as destructive.
The political
we're talking about we're talking about the negative impact
I see,
on the
not just the political inequality that has always been there.
We're talking about the destructive impact of technology on the environment.
And then that also nests with or is related to the political structure.
Well, of course.
Yeah, it's related to, because the technology and the fossil fuels and that thing about saying politics is local, it's all economic. Those are economic things.
Yes, but fossil fuels, oil, for instance, was garbage in 1700 and 1800 before industrialization.
Yeah.
But when you needed something to lubricate moving parts, when you need a source of energy to create energy, then oil became black gold.
Yeah, right, that's right.
But before that, it was crap.
Yeah.
It destroyed the soil for the farmers.
But but my point I'm getting at, you have a power structure. I love Sarah's founder. She said the inequality of wealth in the United States is greater than it was in 1789 France. That led to a revolution. that led to a situation that was coming out of the inequity. You're saying that
Well, that's why they're militarizing the CUNY campuses.
Okay,
because that's the point.
That's what
we
we're
go
trying
back
to get
this.
to. We're
Exactly.
trying to get to the whole
So that's
thing.
why they're militarizing in
why
anticipation of more cuts in food stamps under Obama, more cuts in SSI under Obama, more cuts in Social Security under the Democrats, as we had 2 consecutive years, 2010 and 11, where there were no increases in Social Security, yet rent went up, utility went up.
That's true. That is true. Yeah,
transit fares went up.
Just general food
So if
costs
people are going to revolt,
Yeah.
and naturally the 1%, which is more interested in what club they belong to, whether it's doubles or the Cosmopolitan, or can I get onto the social register?
Can I get into Harvard?
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, that kind of mentality.
Yeah. So of the
That's
elite,
why they have no concern for the environment, and besides,
no, they have no concern for the least among us, which most all of our wisdom schools
the least
have
among
said,
us happen to be at this point the most of us at this point
most
because
of
of
us
the
in numbers.
inequality
Yeah.
that Sarah Flounders just
Yeah.
brought out.
Yeah.
Because of this gross inequality, the most unequal industrial society on the planet.
Well, then I wonder if we can go back, if we can, I don't know, because it's a wide-ranging thing and it's very apropos of the moment and everything like that. But do we then go back to the economic theorizing that informs the political process? Should we go back to Karl Marx? Shall we go back to the socialist traditions? Should we be encouraging, or should we have the abolition of the private property capitalist
Well, let me answer
economy?
a couple of those
what
questions.
What are some of the answers?
Well,
that are theoretical?
it just so happens that last week...
Who are the inspirational sources of a critique of the system that's in place now? First of all, maybe say, what is the system, the economic theorizing assumptions by which the planet is operating now? Is it John Maynard Keynes? Is it Joseph Schumpeter? Is it Milton Friedman? Is it Karl Marx?
It's
what
closer
is it?
to Milton
and what
Friedman
should it be?
on a global scale.
And how did it get to be that way? And how
because
can we
of
address
globalization.
it? And so that's
and
ultimately,
because of the arms race, which bankrupted the Soviet Union and converted Russia and China to capitalist societies, even though China is led by a communist party. And it's a one-party state, but it's the most successful economically, so one can make that case. But just last week,
theoretical economics, who should
let me
inform
answer some of those questions.
Okay.
Obviously, socialism is better now. At least more and more people, at least a third of the people, according to the latest Pew poll, are favorable towards socialism.
You're talking about the United States?
United States.
Okay.
Okay, and last week, the first socialist was elected to city council in over a century. Socialist Alternative Party. City Council, Kashana Sawant, I forget, she's a South Indian woman.
Okay.
Very articulate, very impressive, very strong on behalf of the people, who wears a shirt that says minimum wage $15.
Yeah, they want to put the minimum wage up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, socialism is on the march. That's why the 1%.
You think it is? Okay.
That's because of the privation. That's why Kelly and Bloomberg militarized the police department. Stop and frisk is to keep the people down. I have to teach students who've been stopped and frisked. They've been traumatized. They cannot compete with a white student who hasn't been stopped and frisked on an exam, because if I was so traumatized by the behavior of some of the police in New York City, I can't compete. And when Bloomberg was doing $700,000 a year, and then he had the temerity, the nerve, the insensitivity to saying that the African and Latino are not being stopped and frisked enough. It's good that he's leaving. The best thing that's happening to New York, that he's leaving New York.
Okay. Oh.
And he's going to London, where they're building a square for him. So maybe he can do a command performance before the Queen for the same kind of inequality that he perpetrated in this city in the 12 years that he reigned and bought his way. $261 million he spent of his own money to get elected to 3 terms.
So who are the philosophical roots of this, what you call socialism?
Well, obviously Karl Marx.
No, all right, Karl Marx.
And the British were asked at the turn of the millennium, who was the greatest figure of the last 1,000 years? And the answer was Karl Marx. Time magazine, which works for the 1%, Skull and Bones, Henry Luce, same party, same fraternity as Kerry and Bush, didn't give the American people the choice. They just announced the greatest historical figure of the last 1,000 years is Albert Einstein. They didn't give a poll. They didn't ask the American people.
I got
the
mixed
British
up
did.
on who you're talking about. The British people?
The British said Marx was the most important historical figure in 1,000 years. They did a poll around the turn of this millennium, whereas the Americans, the American 1%, the ruling class, Time magazine, didn't give people the option of voting for that historical figure. They just announced that it was Einstein, which, I mean, I'm not going to disagree that Einstein was one of the most important figures, but the point is the British conducted a poll, the Americans' power structure didn't even conduct a poll.
Well, why bothering what the people think?
Because they don't want Marx to go.
You have the experts to tell you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But obviously we need some redistribution of wealth here. That's why the progressive income tax was put in 1913.
Well, I know they had
the disparity was so great. But the disparity is greater now in New York City. 45% of the assets of this city are controlled by 1% of the population.
Yeah, well, Krugman wrote that the tax cuts that came, the signature thing with Mr. Bush was what, $1.3 trillion tax cut, and the benefits of that did not go only to the 1% or even 1/10. They went to 1/100th of 1%
That's
of
correct.
the population.
That's
There's
correct.
something screwy in terms of
No,
the.
it's not. They have the power. They're utilizing it.
No, what it might be, there's something screwy in
On their own
terms
behalf.
of the design, because it's pretty obvious that you're going to have people who have the ability, if nothing else, to clear the market of what can be produced.
Well,
I mean, there's not enough demand.
Look,
it's a demand thing, so you could go to Keynes or something.
no, you can go abroad. That's what American companies are doing. They're looking for
Well, they can. Yeah, but
exporting jobs.
can't you understand it in a certain sense? They're going to do that. You got containerization.
Well, because
you got
the
all
people
these,
have no control
this
over the economy.
Right.
They're serfs.
Well, it's always been that they're serfs.
Except
There's never
but
been a golden
Harold,
moment
the
when there
Harold,
was justice.
This
It's always
society
been-
benefited tremendously from the Second World War, which
Of course
provided
they did.
close to full employment. In
Yeah.
fact, there was
Willow Run.
in 1944, Roosevelt pronounced an economic bill of rights that he was going to foster: the right to a job, the right to education, the right to health care, and the right to decent housing. All of that spelled security. You can get it online. Michael Moore discovered the videotape.
You think it holds
process.
in the face
Well,
of
I'm
what's
saying in
going?
44 with
Yeah.
full employment thanks to the Second World War. It is possible
you
to
go
do
to
this
war.
without war. No, you can do this without war, but you have to have redistribution of wealth and assets, because William Wallen, the great leveler in the Bloody Project, 1648, said, "The rich fear that an end to troubles will be an end to their glory and grandeur."
Right.
In other words, they terrorize the population.
right.
Yeah, that'll keep them in place so they won't challenge the power structure.
That's the way it's always been. The knights would
Not
terrorize.
always, but
they weren't
because,
there to
yes, I
serve
understand
the interests
that.
of the peasants.
But because of the
peasants.
technology, because of nuclear technology, because of burning fossil fuels, we cannot afford the luxury of maintaining this kind of class structure much longer because of global warming, because of what's happening right now in Warsaw, Poland, where the climate summit is taking place.
Mm-hmm. It's
And-
finished now. It's
Well,
over,
it's
yeah.
finished, yes, as of today.
And it didn't get anything for ecologists. Nothing
because
came out of it
because
from
the
great
great powers said,
Yeah.
especially led by the United States, that we don't want to do this. We're not into reparations. We want to maintain their edge. They want to maintain their edge,
Yeah.
and so the prognosis is dire. Period.
The dire. Okay. So what I'm getting at is maybe there's something to be said for.
One-child families.
Well, that's China. They're going to two.
Well, not here. All
apparently.
my friends from school, I should say, my closest friends either adopted or have one child. I think one person has two children. That's
yeah,
it.
right. Well, they're going that way. Malthus and then Paul Ehrlich and all that. But I mean, they're doing that. But the thing is,
But not enough.
What?
Not enough.
That they're you know the technology is relentless. It's coming. I'm glad there's an internet. it seems to offer something. There is not all one bleak thing about everybody, you know, that it's a... Fred Allen, you remember Fred Allen? He wrote a
Used to live on 82nd and 5th Avenue.
He wrote an autobiography, he said, Treadmill to Oblivion. I mean, it's not...
He was a comedian, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a comedian and a raconteur, like Jack Benny or something. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is there may be... so what is it? What would be the prescription for there to be a situation? It may be like the labor theory of value, which informs the socialist concept that all value is created by labor. They've got it down now to where I'm going to do a program with a young fellow. It's going to air a couple days after this one, where he's got a thing, and the robot's going to steal your job. Get used to it. Robotization is
but Stanley Gronowicz, as
the
you know,
labor theory of value is out of date. That's the basis of the socialist critique.
You discussed this with Stanley Gronowicz in 1995 when he came out with Bill DeFazio and their book, The Jobless Future.
The Jobless Future,
because of automation.
Well, you said that
because of automation.
You said that we're going to have employment for everybody. That may be a mistake. We're not looking at it. Maybe it's the fault of the left wing that they're getting into all this trouble.
Harold, I can't keep up with you because you keep asking these questions.
Well, that's
in the 1960s, the promise was made at the height of Soviet and Chinese power, communist power, challenging the U.S., that everyone in this country, we live in an economic nirvana where you'd have a lot of leisure time as machines come in.
Now, who is that? I'm sorry.
Leisure time.
Yeah, but no, where are you writing? What's the source? What are you talking about? Who are you
Everybody talked about leisure time in the 1960s. The jobs are coming and you're going to have more time. But instead what we have, because of the class structure, the severe class structure in society, we have overtime and part-time. Well, we have overtime and part-time. City University, 95% of the faculty members were full-time in the 60s. Today, only 30%.
Yeah, but what you do have is you have technology taking over production.
Yeah, but people have to eat. The average adjunct, the average
part-timer. But the only way that people have to get...
It makes $25,000 a year.
So what you're committed
if they're lucky.
You're committed to the only way for a person to have income to buy food and to be able to live in a house and everything is to have what they call a job. You've got to be
Everybody
employed.
has to do something because our brain... So what do you suggest for human beings to do? Sit around like the rich and decide which club they're going to belong?
Yeah, maybe we might have to do that. We might actually have to liberate people.
We have to have a fiercely progressive tax system.
What does it mean, progressive? Tell me what does progressive
means the more you earn, the more you pay. And no offshore accounts.
Well, then, okay.
There's $21 trillion offshore. We discussed this on an earlier program.
They're hiding their money.
They're hiding their money. We have to send in the Marines to the Cayman Islands and confiscate that money because it's illegal.
Okay.
We can even go to the banks here and do that because what they do through their legalistic schemes and scams is to offshore it, then get somebody in another country to set up a bank here and park those offshore accounts physically within the banks, within Manhattan.
Well,
there's over $1 trillion of that in Manhattan, which should be taken over. If I were mayor, I'd use the police department to take over that money.
Well,
I wouldn't use it for stop and frisk,
Why don't we
that's
do
for
away
sure.
with the banks? Why don't we do away with the private sector? Why don't we do away with all these people?
No, you go from one extreme to the other,
Well, I'm
Harold.
just trying to say that's
no,
where
you
it
don't
ends
go
up.
from one extreme. No, it doesn't end up that way.
Okay, good.
It doesn't end up that way.
Okay, more reasonably, yeah.
Well,
right.
I'm being reasonable.
Okay.
You keep positing these outliers and these extremes when I'm trying to say we have to steer in a more equitable direction. We have to have a fiercely independent, a fiercely progressive tax system, which we do not have.
Okay, should we have a wealth tax or a tax on wealth or a high? And 92%.
Well, obviously, we have a
when we had Eisenhower, they were taxing 92% of the wealth.
That's correct.
So
that was
why don't we have? Why don't
because they had to compete with communism in the world, and they had to show that the rich couldn't be as greedy as they are today.
But what should the tax rate be on the private sector?
I don't know. You have to figure that out.
No,
but it certainly has to be more than it is now.
Yeah.
And they have to pay some taxes. There are companies that don't pay taxes that park everything overseas. Apple pays less taxes than I do.
Well, they will. They
proportionally speaking.
They
of
got
course.
people who can do that. They can work in the global market. They're not stuck to this country.
No, but I'm
and be
talking
held
about.
up by
I'm
a bunch
talking
of
about
people who are gonna steal all
offshore.
their.
I'm talking about offshore accounts.
Yeah, but then you're saying they're illegal, but they're just.
They're illegal because they're not paying any taxes. They're offshoring them.
Well,
Whereas the rest of us have our taxes taken out in our paycheck, even before we have a chance to file our taxes the following year and try to get the money back from the IRS.
Is it possible to get, let's say, on two vectors, okay, in terms of production?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you say on one hand you've got labor, okay, and they've got this surplus value of labor theory that everything that is produced, you got this natural resource. It was all there when the cavemen were here. All the oil, everything was here. You had to lay aside with technological average, but you got the labor theory of value. Labor creates all wealth. Where labor is the source of all progress, and capital or capital instruments or assets are congealed labor or stolen.
Well,
That's the theory.
surplus
value. Yeah,
Surplus
okay,
value.
they got that. But now you've got labor's input to production, mankind's thing, and then you've got everything else intangibles that could be contained within private sector corporate stock. You know, you own things. And the vast majority of the population own nothing. All they own is their
The majority of Americans do not leave estates to their children.
Well, okay, but the point being is the ratio
with your point.
between the labor and then the other things, the machinery, the buildings, the roads,
Fixed assets.
other than labor. Okay?
Well,
that it is moving toward other than labor is the means by which things are being produced. They got robotics coming now. Practically everything's being made by robots. You don't need people
That's not
to
true.
produce a
Ask the
cornucopia.
1,000 textile
And they
workers.
let all the capital
Harold,
assets.
ask
Why
the
does the left let all the capital assets be
Stop.
owned by a small group rather than have some ownership themselves?
Tell
as
that
a
to
way.
the 1,000 textile workers
I'm
who
telling
died in Bangladesh. They need labor. Please don't say that they
Oh,
don't
no,
need labor.
okay, well, that's the theme. No, the trend. The trend is toward having other things, material things being produced by something other. It is, there's statistics. Do you know airlines of the world? We're caught up with a lot of back thinking.
We need less airlines,
No,
less
but
flying
the
because of the
airlines
destruction of the
world,
ozone layer.
The airlines of the world, they would be more reliable and safer if there was no pilot at all in the airplane.
Well, Harold, they're pretty safe right now.
No.
The safest
That's
form.
not the point. The point is technology is displacing the human input to production.
It will never completely
and
replace.
they allow all the
It will never completely replace.
Okay, they won't completely. But the point is, why does
And
the
it's
left?
needed. It's needed.
Why does the left let all the assets be owned by a tiny plutocratic
Why does the
class?
left? Because the right uses violent, covert, and overt means to keep people in their place. That's
okay,
why.
that's one possibility.
Well,
what
not
about
one
the fact-
possibility.
What
Ask-
about
ask
one
John
thing
Lennon.
clinging to the theory, the labor theory of value, which the left does,
Because
which is
the
out
labor
of date
theory
with
of
the way
value,
things
you
are
may
going.
think it's out of date, but I don't think there's anybody who disputes that Marx is undergoing a renaissance. Even Time magazine recognized that when it says that Marx is coming back because of the great inequality, material inequality in this society.
Well, okay, that's a good way to look at the world.
That's a good way to
Very
end it,
good.
Harold.
Your pleasure. Tony Gronowicz. I didn't get a chance to show you his thing. Let's show you. This was our office of mayor, and this is something.
There was no row F because at the last minute the BOE decided to change it.
Keep fighting, Tony. Keep
I'll
fighting.
always
It's good.
keep
He can be a
fighting.
good
Keeps me
mayor.
in shape.
Your pleasure to have his
Yeah, I serve the
perception.
people, not the
We serve the
special
people and
interests.
not the special interests. That's good. Great to talk to you, Tony. Great
And
to
the
see you.
environment and the other species
and the
as well.
environment and the buttercups and the butterflies
That's right.
and everything. Okay.
Remember, that's how Wuthering Heights ended, with
That's
the butterflies.
True. That's true.
Okay?
Thanks for viewing. We'll be coming back tomorrow. That's it for now. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot, Tony, for everything. It's
always
great
fun.
talking to you. Okay. Okay, over and out. See you tomorrow.